Hey, what's up, comrades? Hope everyone's doing great. We're here to talk about the X-Men and the Micronauts. Yep, the Micronauts. What are the Micronauts? Micronauts are a toy line of little figures that came out in the 90s. And Marvel got the rights to the comics or something, or somehow they're related. Anyway, so they made this this 4-issue limited series that is kind of wacky, but also plays into some things that are like definitely a part of I don't know if it's canon lore, but stuff that comes up later and has kind of come up in the past. So anyway, so we start off getting introduced to the Micronauts. There's Huntar, Acro Year, Bug, yep, Fireflight, Commander Ran, and Marionette, and they all have various powers. And then we also get like a slight introduction to the current X-Men line, which is they're still calling Kitty Ariel for some reason in this, but also Colossus, Nightcrawler, Mohawk, Storm, and Wolverine. So we start with the Micronauts. There's some issue where they're trying to fight like the dog people or something, and they got like they have a giant spaceship, which is like another robot that like has life or something. I don't know. I didn't have these toys, so I'm not exactly sure. But they're like fight, and there's these dog soldiers are really like fighting real tough and real hard, and there's like an issue because they seem to be controlled by like an outside entity, because normally the Micronauts are going to be fighting against Baron Karza, but Baron Karza like teleports onto their ship because they're in alliance just for this, because some outside force is destroying all their plans, and so they have to overthrow them and fight them before they can like go back to fighting among themselves or whatnot. Right, so then we get some cool battle scenes, and Karvov is just like in the background like conducting business. And then this guy shows up, and it's Xavier's like Mindscape battle thing from way back when he was fighting the Shadow King or whatever, when he rescued Aurora like in a much earlier episode. So it's the same kind of like Limbo-esque uniform, like Centurion kind of looking thing. That so clearly the X-Men are somehow related. And this dude is just like lighting it up. He's just beating the shit at all these people, and so. He just completely destroys and captures the Micronauts. Baron Karvov's like, yo, like, ruh-roh. And so he decides he needs to escape with this ship and teleport somewhere else where they can get some assistance. We then flip over to the X-Men. We get a lot of fan service with like Sexy Storm in the tub, or not in the tub, in the pool. We get Sexy Kitty Pryde wearing like short shorts with like Ileana. Kitty Pryde is drawn very... generally, the person doing the art in this is superb at drawing sexy comic women from the 90s. That's all I gotta say about every time you see Storm, Kitty, or any of the women in this. And it'd be nice if some of that translated over to the New Mutants, who are in this, but I have never, and I don't think I ever will see Danny Moonstar ever look as attractive as she does in this. Speaking of the Mutants, Xavier's down in the danger room running some process with them, and then all of a sudden, let's see... Baron Karvov like rolls up, and so the New Mutants fight him, and he's a Micronaut, right? So he's like at some point Sam Guthrie like holds him in the palm of his hand, but he's super strong regardless. He's like fighting everybody off. He's trying to like do stuff. Danny tries to use her powers on him. He uses his powers back, and the New Mutants get beat up, and Xavier gets knocked down. But then the real X-Men come in, and they're able to get him good. And then there's like a thing where him and Kitty like merge for a second as she's like teleporting through him or something, and so she gains possession of his body and he gains possession of her body, and then the giant robot like rolls in. He's like, no, we're all friends. And so they start having a chit chat, and we immediately realize something is wrong with Kitty, because obviously we can hear her mind, but also Lockheed like tries to attack her, which is unusual. They talk about all the help they need in the Micronaut universe or whatnot, and the X-Men agree to help. And so then the robot guy makes them small so that they can get inside and they can transport over to the Micronaut universe, which ends at issue number 1. Issue number 2 picks up where we see the Micronauts. They're in some sort of like mindscape or whatever, and obviously this like overlord character is doing something to them. They're like fighting. They like the bug guy gets transformed to like a real bug. Like Firelight gets like captured. They're all like seeing like one of the guys, Arclight or whatever, Acro Year, sees like the woman who left him with the baby because he like destroyed his planet or something. He's like, it's a lot of like nightmare scenario stuff with everybody. I don't know these characters, and I really don't give a fuck. So but then we see like Captain Ran is in love with Mari, and she looks like she's dead. She's doing some crazy dance thing, looking hot as shit, but still. All right. And so then the overlord guy, like, he uses this to like kind of take control of their minds and turn them into his like slaves or whatever. We then switch over back to the X-Men world, and we see Danny in a sexy swimsuit hanging out. Professor X is like taking a napopotamus, and everyone's like, shh, he's trying to sleep. We go back to the just for that. Back in the Micronaut universe, the Micronauts get given like X-Men uniforms, like the original X-Men uniforms from like way back in the day. And they're told they're going to be serving this guy, the master, right? It kind of gives us more hints that like this guy is somehow related to Xavier. The X-Men are flying around in the ship with Karva, and they're going back and forth. There's some arguments about like what they're doing, who's doing what, evil, blah 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 blah, and then Karov is like, all right, well, you guys do what you got to do. I'll be back. I got to go check on something. So then he teleports out of there, but obviously it's Kitty, and he goes to meet with, let's see, some guy, the minister of his like kingdom, which is Degrade, and he's like a techno guy, and they get into like a funny argument. Meanwhile, the X-Men, including Kitty Pryde, who's being controlled by who's actually Karvov, they like crash land on this planet where the Overseer is supposed to be. The robot like dumps him out of his mouth, and this world is like a real world, so they're like super small, and they like break into like this house, and then they see Professor X and the X-Men. Slash the Micronaut X-Men, and so they get into a fight, and the X-Men are giving it the best they can, like the real X-Men, but then they are overcome, and then we see Professor X transform into like this Overlord thing, and he then grasps all the X-Men in his hands, and he's like, oh, ho, ho, ho. Meanwhile, Karov, he there's something where it's like he's been like acting on impulse, or like it seems like the Baron has been controlling his old body while he's possessed by Kitty, but now that he's been knocked out, Kitty now has control over this body, and now she can act, which ends issue number 2. Issue number 3 picks up, and we have the Micronauts and the X-Men now both working for the Overlord, and they're just like killing the shit out of people, kind of attacking Karvov's base, and they're just being bad guys essentially. So that's going on. They fight. They're beating the shit out of him. At some point, the Overlord comes over and commands them to all kneel, and then Captain Rand like disobeys slightly by not being like an asshole, by not like he ordered them to like kill everybody, and Captain Rand was like, I'm not gonna kill everybody, and so he like disintegrates him and then brings him back to life to show that he's gonna do what the fuck he's supposed to do, and not be disobedient. Meanwhile, back in like the normal world, the New Mutants find Xavier like passed out and like sweating and having all sorts of issues, and like maybe we should wake him up, because clearly like when he's asleep, this Overlord guy gets like powers. They don't realize this, right? But we're starting to realize this. And then when he doesn't, he like disappears. So then let's see. So then they find this creature that is like a data recorder for Baron Karov, and the Overlord wants to use it to like summon Karov or destroy him or whatever. And then we have Karov, who's actually Kitty Pryde, is working with the minister, and she's trying to get like set up so that she can head over there and fight. And this is where we get confirmation, because she's trying to practice using this guy's powers and whatnot. And she's having a real hard time because she's not actually Baron Karov. She's Kitty Pryde. That's, if you haven't figured out by now, it officially tells you. We then switch over to Kitty Pryde, who wakes up, and she's like scantily clad and very sensual looking in like the sensual bed. And then the Overlord comes over in like a robe, even though he's like made of gold. Like the fuck? And he starts like flirting with her or whatnot. The X-Men wake up, and they're in some sort of dungeon, and Wolverine's like gained his senses back, so he starts waking everybody up. And he's talking about killing the Micronauts, or killing all of them so they don't take mind control over them again, but Colossus stops in the last second. They then talk about what they're going to do and how they're going to beat this Overlord character. We then get sexy Danny Moonstar in like just a shirt. Oh my goodness. And then we go back to Kitty Pryde, and it is like a very sensual scene with like the Overlord like laying next to her, and she's like on her back, like barely covered or whatnot. And then he's like, wait a second, there's some issues going on here. And then he gets distracted because Xavier has like, once Danny like got close to him, he was able to touch her and then use her to like get out of like his own mind, and then he went to the astral plane to fight the Overseer guy. And because he's distracted, and Kitty, who's actually Karov, like pulls out a dagger and stabs him, and then that allows Xavier to have like a better chance of fighting. And then she's like Karov's like, I got him, I'm gonna go kill the X-Men and the Micronauts and then come back and deal with this mother effer. Meanwhile, Charles is able to get advantage over the Overseer, and then he pulls off the helmet and realizes, dun dun dun, oh, it's him. And he has a whole conversation with himself about how It's the same setup as like when he was fighting the Shadow King guy, and how like something about his unconscious and yada yada yada. And again, this comes up much more in like the main canon stuff. Back over at the X-Men and the Micronauts, they're trying to escape. That one guy, Cry, whatever, he's like freaking out. Storm goes up and comforts him. Acro Year, that's his name, and gets him like to get settled so they can go back. Kitty Pryde, who is, or Karvov taking control of Kitty Pryde's body, is about to like snipe Storm. And then we switch back over to Earth, where Danny comes down and talks about the professor and says there's some like weird, strange shit going on here and that they need to be careful. And we see Amara with like a robe that's barely covering anything. I love it. And the Professor X kind of like wakes up because the Overseer guy is like taking control of him because he like turned around the Limbo fight and now he's winning, which wraps up issue number 3. Issue 4 picks up with more sexy Danny Moonstar. This time she's taken the shirt that she was wearing and she's wrapped it around her breast. And then it's just that and like her panties. Like, what in the fuck? And so she's just sitting there. And then the Xavier, who's possessed by like the Overseer, like shocks her so he can take over like her mind. Back over at the X-Men in the Micronaut universe, they're going. Karza shoots at Captain Rain to kill him, but then Colossus steps in the way and Nightcrawler teleports up there to beat the shit out of Kitty, and then they realize something's up with that whole situation. Then Kitty, who is Karvov, attacks the base. Karza, I keep saying Karza attacks the base, and kind of shakes everything up, and then she gets like a message from Professor X, and teleports in because the Karza, who is now Kitty Pryde, is going to kill like the Overlord or whatever. And so Kitty, as Karza, teleports in and knocks herself out with like her magic glove and holds her against the wall. And then when all the Micronauts and X-Men show up, she has to like convince them that she's not, that, you know, they switched bodies and that she's not the bad guy that they switched. And then the Overlord sits up and it's like, I'm actually Professor X, and then they kind of get filled in on everything that's going on. Meanwhile, in like Earth, Professor X, who's possessed, I know it's so confusing, possessed by the Overseer, is like, aha, Cerebro, I will use this to be evil and do evil shit. And while he starts to do that, the base is still being destroyed, and so the Micronauts and the X-Men and Baron Karza have to like escape. And so they summon the robot ship who teleports them out of there into him, and then they got to like break through the barrier there, but they can't break through the barrier to get to their world because of reasons. But then they can, because Fireflight has some ability to like enter like the Nexus plane or whatever. And so while the robot gets blasted pretty good, they're able to teleport back to like the real world. And so they're all real small, but they get there. And then Firelight is like all fucked up from like the things that are going on. And then we get like Kitty in like another sexy outfit because she's Karza, and then Storm like hugs Karza, who's actually Kitty. It's like a funny fucking scene. Like, what? Immediately the robot gets attacked by Cannonball because all the New Mutants are like possessed. We then see them in outfits that like we never see them in. Like Danny's wearing like a Sacagawea outfit. Like, the fuck? Meanwhile, the professor who is possessing the body of the Overseer is like, I am dying, and Nightcrawler's like, I'll fix you, and he's like, do not fix me, because I'm going to trap that other guy in this body. I'm going to go to the Limbo, drive him back into this body, and then I'm going to let this body die, and that'll kill him for good, supposedly. So just leave me alone. And Nightcrawler is like, okay, got it. So then we see Danny again in her like ridiculous like Native American like outfit, which she's never worn, but okay. Professor then goes to, and he finds Lockheed, who's over Ileana. Ileana's kind of knocked out, and sends Lockheed out to help. He then tracks down the Overseer, who's possessing Xavier inside Cerebro, and he goes to Limbo in there. We get a lot of like flashbacks of stuff, including Dark Phoenix, and then they start like battling. Lockheed flies out and starts helping with the battle. Like they get between Kitty, who's possessing Karza, and Lockheed. They trap Karza, who's possessing Kitty, and then they like re-merge, and then with the power of Firelight they're able to like re-switch bodies again. Meanwhile, Professor X is having like and then Kitty gets like knocked out, and now she's just wearing like a leotard. Like, the fuck? And Karza is like knocked back to his world, it seems, or he's just destroyed. The robot's also kind of destroyed because there's like lava for some reason, and so Nightcrawler's got to like rescue Xavier, or the Overseer, who's Xavier's like kind of in the body, that Xavier's going to drive the Overseer back in away from the lava so he doesn't die too early. So that Xavier, who is now in like the mindscape fighting the Overseer guy again, and it gets to a point where Xavier gets enough control over his body that he is like, oh, I turned off like neuro whatever, I've given myself a stroke and I'm going to die. And then you've committed suicide. And then Xavier's like, yes, as long as it kills both of us. And the Overseer's like, fuck. And so he teleports back to his other body, right? As soon as he gets in there, the body like dies. And then we find out from Xavier after the battle's over that the whole thing with like him committing suicide and killing his own body was just like cat's paw, right? I think that's the word for it. It's like a trick. He tricked him because the Overseer like knew how determined Xavier was to do Xavier's stuff, and so he believed him even though he was lying and they're the same person or something. I don't know. Who cares? So, so he's fine. And everyone's like wrapping up. And so then the X-Men, everyone talks about the robot's kind of dead and how they need to transform out, but then the robot has like enough energy to like do that. And then the Micronauts are going to like teleport back to the universe and keep up the good fight. And Karza's probably there because he disappeared at the last minute and whatnot. And then Xavier's like, I got a headache and need to lay down. That was like some crazy shit that went down. And then Xavier feels bad about all the atrocities that like his evil self like committed, but that's okay. The Micronauts are going to go back to their world and continue to battle on, where the X-Men like move on to less crazy shit. And that wraps up the Micronauts arc. It was wild. The art was really good. The story's fine. It got, it's not confusing when you're reading it because you can see everything and it's like very obviously who's possessing who at what time. But it's like like layers of people possessing each other and like midget people and being possessed by other people, and the whole thing was kind of silly. But it was fun. So go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later.